Other thing that our fractional sales leaders do is kind of train and coach those individual contributors. They might have some objections they've been getting that they're not quite sure how to overcome. We'll watch some of the game film, and if you're not recording all of your sales calls, do that immediately. Get Fathom or get some other sort of AI meeting tool so you can get the transcripts, because you can also even leverage AI. If you have all your call transcripts, you can put them in there and start to ask them questions about, hey, what are the most common objections or concerns we're hearing? We've got 40 calls, and they're like, what were the best ways that we overcame them? And then you can have this fractional sales leader create some training and coaching for the sales rep.
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr. I'm filling in for Jeb Blount Sr. And today we've got an amazing guest. I'm really excited for the conversation. We're going to focus on fractional leadership and fractional sales leadership. Mike Malloy is here. So happy to have him. But before we get going, I want you to check out Sales Gravy University. Sales Gravy University is the most powerful sales training engine for sales teams across the world. It is a place where you can have live training, on-demand training, and we cover the spectrum of business development, bringing pipeline in, all the way through marketing and account management, everything in between. We've got 45 different contributors to Sales Gravy University that provide their expertise. It's unlike anything you've seen in the world. If you want to book a demo, go to Sales Gravy University. That's Sales Gravy University. Learn.salesgravy.com. If you want to take a free course, use the code FREECOURSE at checkout. And today we've got Mike. Mike, you've had an incredible career. I was looking at your LinkedIn. I was looking at some of the things your team sent over. You are a teacher. You just mentioned that pre-production, and you are an entrepreneur. I don't know what came first. I feel like entrepreneur is always there, but you were at Georgetown for 9 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, so I love Georgetown area. If you haven't been, if you're in the DC area, go visit Georgetown. It's like the best part of DC because it has all the cool coffee shops. And you have seen a lot. But I wanted to ask you how you got into fractional leadership, because leadership and fractional leadership are intertwined but very different. Kind of
Yeah.
walk us through your path to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Jeff, for having me today. Excited for the conversation. Hi, I'm Mike. I've got previous experience as a Deloitte consultant right out of undergrad to a traveling sunglasses salesman and startup CEO. And I learned a lot about sales on my Waveborn sunglasses journey, which we can touch on today. From there, I became an incubator program director, running an incubator for early stage social entrepreneurs. I started as an entrepreneur in resident at Georgetown about 6 years ago, became an adjunct professor teaching social entrepreneurship and a startup internship seminar course. And I'm passionate about being a relentlessly generous and enthusiastically fun force for good in the world, helping entrepreneurs buy back their freedom and time to focus on what matters most, both professionally and personally. But to be vulnerable for a minute, a lot of where I am today came as a result of my mom passing away in the fall of 2021.
Mm.
And this was a week after my wife found out she was pregnant with her son, aka our chief cuteness officer here at Malloy Industries. And I realized that I couldn't be the change I want to see in the world alone, and found myself at the forefront of the future of work during the Great Resignation, quiet quitting era, which led me to be all in that the future of work is fractional. Therefore, I'm now the CEO at Malloy Industries, which creates more time and freedom for CEOs, especially at B2B SaaS companies, by giving their undesirable hats to vetted fractional executives. CEOs who want to scale their B2B sales from 1 to 2 million to 10 to 20 million in annual revenue benefit the most from the Malloy match with a trustworthy fractional sales executive.
And so this journey, and I read your post, and I'm sorry about your loss. I know that's difficult to work through, but you made a significant change in your life, and not to get away from the main topic here, which is fractional leadership. I read through your testimony, and kind of walk the Sales Gravy audience through what you did and what the impact has been on your life.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started as a Deloitte consultant. They kind enough to pay for me to go to Georgetown, get my master's in computer science, and then followed the very typical career path to traveling sunglasses salesman, which I would assume most of the listeners are, probably thinking that's next on their career ladder as well. And it was how I dove headfirst into entrepreneurship and how I learned so much about sales, because we started selling direct to consumer online through the website. We did a crowdfunding campaign. We sold 10 grand in a day and a half. Like, crushed our goal. Was like, whoa, there's a there. This is great. And then I was like, well, how do we do 10 grand more days, not just that one day? And I was like, oh, why don't we sell B2B? But I was 25 and eager and enthusiastic, but not all that smart or not that experienced in B2B sales, and had a lot to learn. And I literally went to Automobile University. So I was driving around in a white van full of sunglasses, going to surf shops, listening to sales tapes. It was audible books, but like Zig Ziglar, Grant Cardone, Jim Rohn, like some of the classics really taught me how to approach these sales conversations, how to follow up, how to add nuances to the presentation. And I got really good at closing the sale with the buyer or the owner of these stores. Like one of the mistakes I made early on was, hey, I get the sunglasses, the product in the store, but the 20-year-old surf shop employee knew nothing about Waveborn. They didn't know that we had a social mission, that 10% of the profits were donated to fund cataract surgeries in the
Mm,
developing world,
mm.
or that we had a 365-day warranty, which means if you lose them, you break them, or they're stolen, we'll make a new pair for free. And so it's kind of like the kindergarten game of telephone, where you whisper the sentence around and like it gets a little gobbled. Like it's so important when you're selling B2B or you have channel partners or affiliates that like you are thoughtful in how you articulate the message. You make it easy for them to remember. You provide training, you provide resources so that they can best communicate kind of that brand promise. And ultimately, Jeb, long story short, I learned that there are for profits, there are nonprofits, and there are no profits. And at 30, I went bankrupt. The business did not work out. We had raised a bunch of money from 27 investors and had to have a lot of humbling conversations shutting it down. And I moved back into mom and dad's basement
Mm.
and kind of caught my breath and worked my way back up, learned, well, I don't actually, Jeff, I don't, did you hear about the small global pandemic a few years ago?
I
Or
you
did,
I was aware of it, yeah.
okay. All right, cool, cool. Yeah. So when that happened, my wife and I left DC, we moved to the beach in Delaware. And so I'm coming to you live from Lewis, Delaware, and have built a life here and now a whole nother business focused on sales and fractional leadership, that we're able to run remotely thanks to the kind of changes that COVID has done to work. And that, I believe for entrepreneurs and people listening who are trying to grow and build their sales, you don't have to just hire full-time employees, full-time SDRs, AEs, VPs of sales, chief revenue officer, whatever the titles are that you need. Like there's a lot of value you can get from fractional talent, and you just pay for the expertise you need as you need it on a month-to-month basis.
Leading into the next part of the conversation, which is, I mean, I imagine there's a lot of businesses out there and a lot of CEOs and a lot of leaders who and like you said, you give them back their time. They're frustrated with how much time they're spending um, working in the business versus working
Yeah.
on the business. Is a very common phrase. And we know that from experience as a sales training organization, we work with all kinds of different kinds of businesses when you're in the growth mode, there's a lot of challenge in finding the right talent for the right pieces and putting the right people in place. What is fractional leadership boiled down to? What should CEOs understand about it before they dive into it? And then what are some things that people totally misunderstand?
Great questions all around. And the in versus on the business is a huge one. And so a fractional leader, yes, they're embedded in the team. They represent the company. They lead the team or the department, whether it's sales or marketing or HR operations. Um, but they're not full time. They're not salaried. You're not paying all of the benefits and overhead. There usually isn't an end date, though. It's not like a consultant or an interim project for 3 months. We'll often come in and start for 3 months with the thought that, hey, this is going to kind of be ongoing in perpetuity. At some point, maybe they grow large enough that they want to bring this person in full time, or we've actually helped several clients hire a full time replacement once they had hit those revenue thresholds. Or in many cases, the CEO needs to step out of sales to go fundraise and do the investor dog and pony show, but the revenue still has to go up and to the right. And so they need a grown up, somebody who has 10, 20, 30 years of experience to come in and lead the department. And so on the sales side, you know, that looks a lot like running the weekly sales pipeline meetings,
Mm, mm,
and for a lot of our clients, the person who's been running them is usually the CEO who does not have a sales background, does not know how to build the culture of a sales team or hold people accountable or have, a structured pipeline review, start at the bottom, let's work our way up. Let's talk about our commits from last week. And, um, you know, the other thing that our fractional sales leaders do is kind of train and coach those individual contributors. They might have some objections they've been getting that they're not quite sure how to overcome. We'll watch some of the game film, and if you're not recording all of your sales calls, do that immediately. Get Fathom or get some other sort of AI meeting tool so you can get the transcripts, because you can also even leverage AI. If you have all your call transcripts, you can put them in there and start to ask them questions about, hey, what are the most common objections or concerns we're hearing? All right, we've got 40 calls, and they're like, what were the best ways that we overcame them? And then you can have this fractional sales leader create some training and coaching for the sales reps on how to handle those. Um, Another thing that a lot of companies need help with is actually setting the sales strategy.
Mm.
Like, what is the go-to-market motion? Is it low touch, high touch, dedicated touch? Maybe there's some level of no touch if there's some product-led growth in there, depending on the type of the company. Um, but they need repeatable systems and processes that can scale as the business scales. And having a CEO who's charismatic and has a lot of great relationships and everybody wants to work with them doesn't get you to 10 million. It might get you to 1 to 2 to maybe even 5, but at some point, hey, there needs to be a way that other people who aren't the founders can sell it. And spoiler alert for all the CEOs looking for their clone who sell it exactly the way they do. Like, no, nobody is going to have the same passionate personal story and narrative. And it's a different type of sale when you're bringing people in off the street who then are representing your business, can talk to strangers or even warm inbound leads, whether it's cold or warm, and identify what the problem pain point is that is a migraine headache for them, that eventually you can then be like, hey, look, we have this solution. And in a minute, Jeb, I'll talk through the Pastor sales framework, which we use a lot and is pretty effective.
Absolutely. And well, I think that there's a lot of hesitation out there. The CEO, and I like this persona that we just brought up. The CEO who's really passionate about their project. They can sell it just because they have the energy behind it. There's just something about them that shines, and other people see it. But when you bring in the second in command or the salesperson who's following up behind them, they don't have the same shine, and that's just never going to be the case. So when these CEOs are hesitant about bringing someone fractional into their business, maybe because of that very same concern, what are some things that they should know about fractional employment or leadership that will help them assuage their concerns when jumping into that pool?
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times, if you've never worked with a fractional executive, you're not quite sure, hey, how does this relationship work? And it is remote, so it's a little bit of like, Ma, the meatloaf, like, what's she doing? Like, I don't know. And so I have learned over time that communication is the most important part of this relationship, and setting up a regular cadence. Where at Malloy Industries, every Friday, our fractional executives send an end of week report the Malloy way to each of the clients. And it basically says, here's what I did this week in the key meetings and action items. Here's what I'm going to do next week with the key meetings on the calendar. Here's where I'm stuck. And what do I need from you? I need access to HubSpot, or you got to forward me that email with whatever it is. And then here's my upcoming scheduling constraints. Because one of the things to note is that these people aren't working 168 hours a week for you. They're usually coming in. We usually start at a 40% capacity, which is about 2 days a week. But we're not lawyers billing in 6-minute increments. Like, we're sales guys. We're going to go out there, pound the pavement, make sure we get done what needs to happen. Um, but knowing that, hey, I'm going to take off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for Thanksgiving, or next Tuesday, my son has a dentist appointment, and I'll be out in the afternoon. Proactively communicating that is really effective. The other thing to note is that CEOs may be spending 4, 8, 10, 12 hours a week on sales, and our hope is that we can trim that down to 2 or 3 hours. And one of those hours is in the room in a weekly meeting led by the fractional sales executive, giving you an update on the strategy, the deals in the pipeline, how the team's doing. We can also help with recruiting, hiring, onboarding new AEs, new SDRs as needed as the team grows. So updates on that. And then there may be some high value deals where it is nice for the CEO to come in and kiss the ring and build that rapport with the client, and then be like, hey, you're in great hands here with William. Like, he'll take it from here. But I just wanted to say, how excited we are about the opportunity to work with you. It's not them doing the whole soup to nuts sales pitch, but it is giving a little bit of love. Um, and so I think that's really important. The other thing that I find a lot of entrepreneurs aren't focusing enough on is the right side of the bow tie. If you're familiar with the bow tie model from Winning by Design, there's like the sales funnel typically coming in. That's like the left side of the bow tie, where you're awareness, consideration, evaluation. Okay, you're going to sell them, they're going to commit. But then what are you doing for onboarding, retention, and expansion? Because it is like 9 times easier to sell somebody a second thing when they already paid you for a
Yep.
first thing than it is to find a new stranger on the internet to buy the first thing. And so one of the things that a lot of our fractional sales executives help with is like, what does that quarterly strategic business review look like? How are we identifying other pain points that are complementary products or services, or maybe even our partners or affiliates or just like friends? We do a lot of fractional sales. We also have fractional marketing executives, fractional HR. We've had some salespeople be like, "Oh, they also need help with HR." Like, all right, well, yeah, let's bring in an HR executive. For 5, 10 hours a week, depending on what you need. Um, and part of the other benefit of this fractional model for folks who aren't familiar is that it's flexible month to month. You can ramp it up if it's a busy season. You can ramp it down if it's not a priority. If you don't need as much. Um, and there isn't the long-term commitment and I hope they stay with me for 4 years and I'm going to do all this salary and benefits and overhead and training all these full-time people. Like, no, you're bringing in an executive leader who's actually going to train your whole company how to better run this department as a more mature business as you grow gracefully.
What are some businesses that fit this model and should be really looking into this sort of business? I guess a change would be typical for
Yeah.
them. It'd be a business change. Can you give us some examples of businesses that just fit what you're talking about pretty well?
So B2B SaaS technology companies, if there is some technology element of what you're selling and you're selling it to other businesses and your average contract value is like 5,000 or more, then it's a slam dunk. It makes a lot of sense. The return on investment, it depends a little bit on the sales cycle. So that's also something to note. Like if it typically takes you 2 or 3 months to close a deal, all right, then yeah, I think within 3 to 5 months, you should be seeing a great return on investment. We're gonna, kind of accelerate things there. If you have an 18-month sales cycle and it's super complicated and there's like 17 stakeholders in healthcare, then like we can help if and only if you understand the complexity of the sales cycle
Got it.
and that this isn't a silver bullet. We're not going to make it rain millions of dollars in month one. Um, but this can absolutely be a solution over several years where like you never need them full time. They're able to do the meetings when those busy stakeholders are available. They can oversee, outreach campaigns and things to get more deals in the funnel, but you may also not know what the heck do I talk to somebody about for 18 months before they buy the thing. So that strategy and kind of adding deposits in the relationship bank, reminding them about your authority and things of that can be useful as well.
Mike, you have been doing this for some time, and you've helped customers be really successful doing what you do. Where do you think the future of fractional leadership is heading? Are there any trends that you're taking note of? Looking at 2030, looking at 2027. Maybe even looking at farther than that. Where do you think this is evolving to?
Yeah. So you guys may have heard of the letters AI as a trend in the marketplace. Um, that's not going away. And so I've started to see some interest in like a fractional AI executive or somebody who can set the AI strategy, help execute that across the company. Um, I'm also believe that smart humans who have a decade or more of experience and they've acquired career capital with these rare and valuable skills, they don't have to work full time for just one employer. And so they're able to, in some cases, like turn down a promotion and be like, actually, I'm gonna go do my own thing and I'm gonna work with this client for 2 days a week, this client 2 days a week, and this client 1 day a week, and have a really fulfilling life. Or maybe just two clients for 2 days each and take Fridays off or something, you know? And so recognizing that the folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s of their career, just getting them for a few hours a week, a couple days a week can transform the business. And you don't have to think about, oh, we got to grow our headcount. Like I talked to a company last week that recently raised $75 million. They said, we're going to grow from 14 to 140 in the next 12 months.
Wow.
And I said, wow. I said, I hope you don't get all the way to 140 just using whole numbers. You can add in 50% of a salesperson and 25% of a marketing person. Like there are ways to build that team where you're getting this great expertise um, as needed in those little, different chunks of capacity. And I find that is where this is going to continue to go for knowledge workers. Like this is not the case for, if you're on the supply chain or on the assembly line, like doing manual labor, those sorts of things, like that's a little bit harder. and that's not my sweet spot. We're much more thinking about remote work, teams that are growing and scaling, how to use Zoom and other tools to meet remotely, to move deals forward, to ultimately deliver value to the clients. That's where I kind of see this going as kind of getting the little bits and pieces of what you need as you need while you grow.
The future is looking very different, and especially as we bring in AI and people who are able to leverage business skills that they've developed over decades, where it's going to be much harder for a business to hire someone full time in that space with those specific skills, and you could spend 2 decades developing somebody, or you could fractionally bring somebody in, and 2 hours of their time is worth 20 hours of somebody else's, and you're getting that experience.
Absolutely, and you're not getting a mid-level manager who needs all of the training. Our process at Malloy Industries, like, I'll meet with the CEO, I'll scope out what the problem is, what's the end in mind. Like, if we're sitting down 6 months from now and celebrating that this is a massive success working together, like, what are we celebrating? And let's unpack, like, what are the metrics for success before, during, after? How do we know it's not working now? What do we want to see? And with that in mind, we'll put together a project brief. We have a vetted roster of over 300 fractional executives, and we'll pick the top three for the client to interview. And I frame it this way, that all three of them can do the job, but one of them is going to be a better culture fit.
Mm,
One of them is going to have better interpersonal communication with you. You're just going to vibe. You're going to feel like, oh, this is the one for me. And so that's a lot of what they're looking for in those interviews. We'll meet 7 days later. We'll say, hey, how'd they go? Who's your favorite? Let's finalize timeline, scope, and budget. Do you want to start on Monday or next Monday? Like,
mm,
we're ready to go pretty quick. So I
mm.
think that's another big value prop for fractionals is it can take 3 to 6 months to put together a full-time position description, source a bunch of candidates, interview them, do all the background checks, and actually get them started. We can start within 2 or 3 weeks from that first scoping call. I think our high score was 8 days, but it's usually 2 to 4 weeks from like first meeting to when they can come in and get started.
And speaking of this, Mike, tell people where they can learn more about you, what you do, and the projects you're working on, so that they can understand that this is a move they want to make for their business.
Absolutely. Feel free to email me directly. It's Mike at malloyindustries.com. Our website is MALLOYINDUSTRIES.com. Go to malloyindustries.com/pod. We'll have some resources for podcast listeners there. And always happy to connect on LinkedIn as well. And Jeb, I want to add one last thing on the POSTOR framework, because I hinted at that earlier. And this is a great sales framework that stands for problem, accentuate the problem, solution, transformation, um, and then the offer and what the response is. And so the key is that it starts with the problem. And if I was to ask a question and say, hey, like, what time is it right now? I'm going to direct your attention to your clock, to your phone, your watch. That's an example of a question that directs your attention where I want it to go. What are the questions you and your sales team can ask future customers to direct their attention to the pain points they have, to the problems they're experiencing, to how hard it is that they don't yet have your solution? And so you start with the problem and then you accentuate it, man. You got to twist that knife. What's a follow up second, third question about like how difficult it is, both professionally, but maybe also personally? Maybe they have little Johnny and they want to coach his little league soccer team, but they're working until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. They can't make it to the practices and games. That's part of it. Hey, if you purchase our software, we'll be able to free up your time so you can go do what matters most to you. Then you get into the solution, because there's also this modern customer journey of problem unaware. So if someone is unaware they have a problem, they have no desire to solve it. They don't want to hear the rest of the pitch. Then they become problem aware. They're like, oh yeah, that is a problem. It is something I'm dealing with. But they need to then become solution aware to know, okay, what are the solutions out there? Like, some of your listeners may not have even known fractional executive was a solution to some of their sales problems before this call. After the solution aware, then you want to make them product aware. And so you talk about the solution, then there's an offer. What is your product or service that you can deliver? How does that then create this transformation? And the transformation is like, what is life like in this magical world in the future where they are achieving all of the benefits that your product or service delivers? And a lot of salespeople will lift off all of the features. Nobody cares about the features. They need the benefits. There's a little simple 2-word English phrase that you can connect a feature to a benefit, and it's which means. And so if you think about a feature, which means benefit, you're now able to highlight what are the benefits, what does the life look like with the picture hanging on the wall after it's been hung up, not the fact that, hey, this hammer will hit a nail into the wall. Like, yeah, that's a feature, but the fact that your living room looks better with this cool ocean scene above the couch,
Mm.
that's what they're looking for. And then to wrap up Pastor, you need to have an offer and a response, or like what's the call to action, that you want them to take. Click this button, book this call, sign this contract, etc.
I love it, and thank you for sharing it. I mean, I was trying to remember you said pastor, and I was trying to remember what that was. So I'm glad you brought it up at the end here, and letting folks know it's a really powerful process. And if you're really a student of sales, that process is something that you can learn from a lot of different areas of sales training. But that process he just laid out, like, write that down, right? Go back and listen to it again, because if you are not asking questions that lead to the pain points and providing solutions before products, you're jumping into pitches about a product or a software before you even understand what is challenging for the customer, what they're really trying to solve, which could be, right, that I'm working until 9 p.m. It may have nothing to do with the work itself. It may be what they want to do, and if you're not looking and uncovering that and twisting the knife on it a little bit, it's going to be much harder to push a big deal across the table, or to really get buy-in from a customer that's not transactional, that's actually relational. So I really appreciate you bringing that in.
One last thought I'm going to sneak in here too is that as you're doing demos and things, like, the more the other person can talk, the better, because you're not learning anything new about them when you're talking. So don't monopolize the conversation. Create space for them to share their experiences with those problems. So you can then circle back to that later on in the sales call.
100%. The person who controls the conversation is not the person who's talking, but the person who's asking. And that's just the key to remember. So, Mike, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being on the Sales Gravy podcast, and for everyone listening, go check out Sales Gravy University. Again, learn.salesgravy.com. That's learn.salesgravy.com. Use code FREECOURSE to go get a free course now if you haven't checked it out before. And we'll see you next time from the Sales Gravy Studios.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.